The Timeline is a Blue Wire podcast. Welcome to the Timeline of Phoenix Suns podcast. My name is Mike. I'm here with Sam. Sam, how you doing? What's
up, man? I'm good. It's September. We're getting there. We are chugging right along.
This is something I wanted to talk to you about. This is normally the time of year where I would say optimism season starts. You know, we've talked about this year over year. And the KD dream is over, as we've talked about, at least for now, for most of us. There really hasn't been any major moves from the Suns. Do you feel like it's optimism season right now? Do you feel like it is? For this, or has it been postponed for Suns fans?
Has optimism? I think, Suns fans, as fans do, they find a way. So I have a feeling that, in the next 6 or 8 weeks, people will always find a way, right, to put on their most optimistic hat and kind of just hype themselves up for the season again. And I will say clearly, so I don't just kind of dump on everyone's dreams right here. I am optimistic about the Suns season in a lot of ways. I'm really, really excited for Suns season to get going again, but that's mostly because I'm excited to watch Devin Booker play basketball again. I'm excited to see.
Right.
I'm excited to see growth out of DeAndre Ayton because I think he has some more untapped potential. I'm hoping for some more untapped potential out of Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson. So it's all of those sort of individual things. The problem is, and I guess where I struggle to maybe be a little bit more optimistic, is we've kind of grown out of the era of individual accolades aren't enough anymore, and we really want a championship. And as we kind of been talking about for the past few weeks since the KD dreams have been dashed, it's still possible. It's absolutely still possible. It's just they have work to do, and the prospect of completely talking yourselves they're not in the firmly entrenched first in the championship contenders list anymore like they were at the beginning of last season. They're just in tier 2 or 3 now, and I think I've kind of made my peace with that.
Yeah, I just think it's harder to... I think optimism season often comes with there's a new guy on this team and we get to think about how they're going to fit, and then you can talk yourself into the team being a championship contender and all that. The Suns are going to be good, and I think we're pretty positive they're going to be good. They're bringing back a team that was the best regular season team they've ever had as far as wins, and it's just harder to do that when the prospect of Kevin Durant was just held over the team for so long. So it's just been such an interesting offseason where the normal rhythms of the offseason, the things that you and I have sort of gotten used to after doing this podcast. Now this will be our 5th season? Is this our 5th season? It is, huh?
Jesus, is this our 5th season?
I think it is. Is it?
Yeah,
4th?
This is season number... Holy shit, man. This is season number 5.
As many seasons as DeAndre Ayton's career.
Wow.
Because we started right when he was drafted.
Where's my max contract?
The normal rhythms of the season have all been just jumbled up and mixed around, and I'm sort of just now catching my bearings and figuring out now that we can sort of transition into talking about the team, which I'm actually very, very much looking forward to, and we're going to be doing towards the end of this podcast. But normally when we start doing that, that's when all of the optimism floods in. And I think it still will. I think you're right. I think it still will.
I think I'm
going to talk myself into lots of things. I guarantee that.
Yeah, I think we can effectively talk ourselves into a lot of things. And you're right. If there's anything you can take away from it, at least I've talked about it before, but that feeling, that overwhelming feeling of relief after the whole KD thing was over, that at least we had closure. And yes, there are still ways for this team to pivot. And yes, there are still players that they could go out and acquire either before the season, more likely, in my opinion, at the trade deadline. As
one unnamed general manager said, apparently, the Suns could trade for Anthony Davis.
Well, do you want? I mean, I guess we can hop right into that. But just before we get into that, I'll just say at least we understand what the roster likely is going to be now to start the season, and that allows us to do what I think we do best, which is actually talk about the basketball,
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
Not about the narratives, not about the speculation, not about
so
rumor mill
tired of
season.
We don't have to talk about how Kevin Durant feels on a day-to-day basis.
No. We do not have to put up with that anymore. We can go back to our roots, essentially, which is, I think, actually talking about how these guys fit together on a basketball court. So that is the part that I'm excited for over the next month as we start to, do internal development part 2, because that's where we're at.
Would you trade DeAndre Ayton and Cameron Johnson for Anthony Davis?
I would not. And just so people are very clear about what you're talking about, this is a report that came out apparently this week.
Sort of.
What do you mean, sort of, with the shade already?
It's like it was an anonymous front office executive that said that essentially that the Lakers could move on from Anthony Davis, and then they just made up a trade that they said I could see this happening.
Yeah, no, I know.
And
it's
they
the
said
worst
DeAndre
type.
Ayton and Cameron Johnson.
It's the worst type of off-season reporting. It's late August aggregation, in this case from Sean Devaney,
anonymous
Sean Devaney reporting that it was an anonymous Western Conference executive who said, "Hey, Anthony Davis for DeAndre Ayton and Cam Johnson would work."
Yeah, I could see it. Yeah, it's basically what he said.
Yes.
Which was then aggregated as the Suns could trade it, DeAndre Ayton and Anthony. For Anthony Davis.
Twitter did its thing with that one. I saw most Suns fans come out against it, and I will say, I think this is a little bit particular in terms of my logic and how I approach it, because I feel like I'm usually the guy, or at least one of the guys, I know there are several in our community, many in our community, who's like kind of egging fans on a little bit and saying, like, we overrate. I don't just believe this about the Suns, by the way. I kind of believe this about all fans of basketball, all fans of sports. Like, you overrate your own players. Fan bases grow too attached. And especially when you're in a position like the Suns currently are in, we need to focus on getting better. And certainly Anthony Davis is a tremendous talent. So given all that, it was a little surprising even to myself that I was just so instantly like, no, can't, like, this would be a pretty ridiculous proposition, and I would be firmly in the no camp on this one. But what was your what was your initial reaction? I could explain why too.
What do you think? What do you think it would be from me? I'm very curious.
I'm gonna go ahead and guess that you are also firmly in that no camp.
There's two sides of me, I think, for this one. There's the part of me that is a fan, just a fan, and that part of me really dislikes watching Anthony Davis a lot.
Come to think of it, I was kind of thinking, like, I'm not sure we've ever had, we've been doing this for 5 years. Like you said, I'm not sure we've ever had many discussions on Anthony Davis. He's never really been on the table for the Suns. It's never been even in sort of speculation. It's never made sense. So yeah, I mean, like, kind of, you're not a big Anthony Davis guy then, I take it?
He's just not fun to watch. I don't find him that fun to watch. Like, he's not really durable enough to play center.
Well, that's the big thing.
Right. And that's where he's the most effective.
How about this, though?
His shot finally disappeared from him entirely, going to, like, he shot like 18% from three last year. And if he needs to play power forward, he has to be able to shoot, unless you can find the miracle center like Brook Lopez that can play center, protect the rim, and shoot threes, which is like impossible in today's game. And like, and the big thing is injuries. Now,
yes,
the other part of me, which is sort of a cold-hearted, can we win a championship this way view, I'd have a meeting. Like, if I were James Jones, I would call everyone together and say, what does this look like? Like, what could this actually look like? A future that essentially is built around Anthony Davis and Devin Booker. Like, what are the biggest fears with Anthony Davis's injuries? Are they just sort of nagging injuries that will affect him year over year? Are they injuries that could turn into long-term injuries where his body could break down, like Amari Stoudemire?
Yes.
Where he'll become less and less effective over time?
Yes.
Or, and the final question.
It's a rhetorical question, but yeah, continue.
The final question, can you win a championship this year with him? With Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and Anthony Davis? Those are the questions that I would have to ask. And look, I still lean towards no, for the record, just because I just don't think you can trust him. But I do think that a lot of my opinion on this is affected by the fact that I'm just not a fan. I'm just not a fan.
Yeah,
of
I think it's funny to hear you talk about, like, he's not fun to watch, because, like, if we're talking, like, purely in the casual fan sense, right? Like the dunks, the threes, whatever, like whatever casual appreciators of basketball appreciate, is DeAndre Ayton fun to watch?
I mean,
like I think it's fun.
not
I think DeAndre
necessarily,
Ayton's.
no.
I think DeAndre Ayton's like hook shots and
Yeah, it's
verticality
in the same way that
on
Anthony
defense.
Davis is, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, like DA, I appreciate aspects of his game.
It's just
in,
when
like,
Anthony
a
Davis
deeper
falls on
basketball
the
sense.
ground.
Yeah,
When Anthony Davis falls on the ground going for a block or something, you're going to spend the rest of your night and possibly the next few weeks thinking about that. Because like there's an element of his game where I wouldn't call him fragile. I don't know. Fragile is like not the right word. But like I saw Lakers fans counting the amount of times that he fell on the ground during the season last season, and they had to think about that all the time. You know, somebody like, and I guess to some extent maybe we'll do that with Cameron Johnson in the future, but with DeAndre Ayton, you don't have to do that at all. So like you don't have to, it's not to say that he can't get injured. Everyone can get injured. But there is like this added element of fear that lives in any fan of Anthony Davis that you have to contend with if you're rooting for him.
right. And I think the big thing is that the Suns community, Suns fan base, we already have our fair share of fear in having to worry about Chris Paul. We don't need a second guy. And it really just comes down to one stat. Anthony Davis, an average of 48 games played over the past 4 seasons. It's not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it.
Yeah.
Like if it's a question of, I still concede that Anthony Davis is a better player than DeAndre Ayton.
He's a better player than both of those guys that we would trade for him.
But
yeah.
like, would I rather have 65, 70 games of DeAndre Ayton or 48 games of Anthony Davis? And to this point, let me put on the nerd cap for a second. We haven't done a little VORP sidestep in a while.
Yeah.
Cam Johnson, what VORP does, like I haven't done the spiel in a while. Probably it's been about a year since my last VORP spiel, but like it's a cumulative stat, right? So it's basically just a BPM multiplier. It's taking this advanced stat, box plus minus, and saying how many minutes do you play, and we're multiplying that. So the way to have a high VORP, in addition to being like, good in the minutes you play on the floor, is you need to play a lot of minutes. Cam Johnson had a higher VORP than Anthony Davis last year. That's not because Cam Johnson was a better player than Anthony Davis, at least according, again, to this one particular stat. It's because Cam Johnson played 66 games. Anthony Davis played 40 games. So at least according to this stat, Cam Johnson provided more value to the Phoenix Suns than Anthony Davis did to the Los Angeles Lakers. Again, this is only last year.
He was bad last year, though. He was like really bad.
And Cam Johnson was also
there
good.
is an assumption. There's an assumption that Anthony Davis is going to be good or better, which we don't really actually.
Well, I'll give him credit for one thing. He would be better with Chris Paul than he was with Russell Westbrook. But that aside, it still just comes down to the injury thing, and it's like that was just a 1-to-1 comparison between Cam and AD. Add DeAndre Ayton to the equation, and yeah, it makes no sense. So I think we can move on.
I'd be very curious what James Jones would actually think about that.
He's no Julius Randle. I will say that.
He's definitely. I mean, he'd be arguably Anthony Davis at his peak would be the best player on the Suns. I hate to say that about Devin Booker, but like there are things that Anthony Davis can do when he's on fire that on both ends of the floor, he can shut down like an entire half of the court defensively by himself in a way that very, very, very few players in the NBA can. And that's pretty amazing. But, offensively, we just really haven't seen him be who the Lakers needed him to be outside of the bubble. So who knows if he'll ever be that again.
It's kind of incredible, just as a quick aside, like how quickly Giannis came in and started dominating the league and like shifted the perspective of what exactly a unicorn, if you want to use that word, is capable of accomplishing at the NBA level, right? Because like you think back to Anthony Davis kind of before the injuries when he was averaging 70 games played a season with New Orleans. At this point, he was probably 23, 24 years old. This was like 5 years ago. But him at his peak, this was before Giannis was really dominating anyone, and he was the prototype, man. I mean, he was kind of like the next generation Kevin Garnett, I would say, for like this current generation of basketball players. And then, the injuries happen, and I don't know. I guess I could just feel like Giannis has kind of come in and taken that all up.
There was like a brief
notches.
stint where people thought Kristaps Porzingis was going to be that, and that went away pretty quickly and dramatically. And then yes, Giannis came through and just like a tornado just came through the league. And really, I don't think there was a moment in time where people thought Anthony Davis was like the next best player of the league. And there's nobody that thinks that now. I don't think there's any way that you could say that.
You can't.
It's mostly due to injuries.
I think you'd struggle to find anyone who even puts him top 10 these days.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, last year, if you just look at last season alone, you definitely wouldn't. He was bad. Let's talk about somebody else. Jae Crowder is still upset.
This is our new version of the KD Weekly segment, the Jae Crowder fuming segment.
I'm upset. Yeah. Okay. I think we have some sort of clue as to why now. He posted on Instagram something, and then he pinned a comment that somebody said, "Pay the man at Miami Heat. We want him back." And then Jae Crowder pinned that comment. This is all very 21st century bullshit, but the implication, I think, was maybe he's asking for an extension here, right? And the Suns are not giving him one. And that added security that comes with maybe potentially being asked to play off the bench, because if he's no longer starting, he probably is looking at himself in a contract year, no longer starting, and doesn't have financial security, then at that point he might be saying, all right, you're messing with my money now, because you're asking me to come off the bench right before I become a free agent, and that's not a good time to lose some money. So I think maybe the idea that he pinned a comment that said pay him, maybe he's pointing at the fact that maybe he wants to be extended at this point, and the Suns are not doing that. What do you think?
Well, look, I actually think it's really smart from Jay, and obviously he has his own vested interest in his money. But I think when you look around the NBA and specifically trying to pinpoint the value of guys, the role that Jae Crowder plays, the sort of 3-and-D role, minutes eater, if you will, veteran leader and whatever. There's a really, really fine line for some of these role players who aren't initiators, right? Who aren't playmakers. There's a really fine line between the guys who get to start and eat up 30, 35 minutes per game, and those are the guys who get mid-level exception type contracts, sometimes even more. Sometimes they're making $15 or $20 million a year. Jay is not one of those, but he is still making $10 million a year. There's a fine line between that first tier of player and the second tier of player, which is, we've kind of reached a saturation point of the league now where there are so many wings. Not all of them can be qualified as 3-and-D exactly, but at least most of these guys give you one or the other, or do a little bit of both. And there's so many guys who you can just kind of scrape from the bottom of the free agent pile for literally a veteran minimum contract to accomplish 70 or 80% of the same thing. And I think it's a good point on your part. Something Jay might be struggling with is this realization that if he plays 15 minutes per game this year because Cam Johnson is eating up all the minutes, you'd be surprised just how fast you can go from that $10 million a year player to making $2 million on your next contract. It happens quick.
Or a 3-year contract to a 1-year minimum.
Yeah,
essentially.
It happens really quick because you lose the opportunities to post flashy box score stats. Obviously, that's never been what Jay is about anyway, but it doesn't help your case when you're going into negotiations the next offseason and you're coming off a season where you played 16 minutes per game, you averaged 5 points, and it's you just get fewer opportunities to prove yourself at the highest level. You're not taking the toughest defensive assignments anymore, maybe like you used to. It just becomes difficult. So from that perspective, I think it makes sense that Jay, but does he deserve an extension at this point? No, frankly, I don't think he does. So, there is also another...
But there's probably a team, a.k.a. the Miami Heat, whispering in his ear that they'd give him one.
That's fine.
Right?
The other... So the other side of the story is kind of let them do that. You know what I mean? I don't think... Yeah. I think we're going to talk about Cam Johnson a lot with a great guest for the rest of the episode. I think Cam Johnson is the guy at this point. He's starting, whether Jay likes it or not. I don't think appeasement, it doesn't feel like is really even an option anymore. Not to be too extreme, I think Jay could still play for the Suns and play well this year. But it kind of just feels like he's settling into this groove of this is kind of going to be what he does all season. And I don't know if you can make everything fine again, short of offering him this extension, which I don't really think he deserves, 1 year before. So that's just kind of how it is.
PJ Tucker signing a 3-year massive contract at 38 years old probably didn't help in trying to talk to Jae Crowder about potential contract extensions at this point as well, because that is an absurd contract. And Jae Crowder probably thinks he's someone who could get something like that in the future. But it is funny that, we just saw an offseason where Kevin Durant couldn't effectively force his way off a team. So why should Jae Crowder be capable of doing that? Not to say the Suns won't trade him, but he's trying, I think, at this point, at the very least, to either get an extension or get traded. Last thing before we switch over to our segment here, Eurobasket. is coming, and it's starting very, very soon. Dario Saric obviously playing. Lots of NBA players in Eurobasket in general. Luka Doncic, Nikola Jokic, I think, are the big headliners.
It's a really exciting Euro. This is the first Eurobasket in 5 years, Mike, and kind of you just think about like the European field of players and what that looks like in 2022 versus 2017. It's like way better. It's way better. I'm really excited for this competition, actually. Not even just the Saric aspect, which I'm excited to watch him play too, but like you've got Doncic, you've got Giannis, you've got Jokic, you've got like a competitive field of a lot of interesting teams, and anyone could win.
Yep. You can watch a lot of, I think all games are on ESPN Plus.
Yep.
So you can find those games on ESPN Plus. They're all very early in the morning outside of one game next Tuesday. There's Friday against Greece, Saturday. These are all, of course, Dario Saric's game. Saturday against Great Britain. Monday against Estonia, Tuesday Italy, Thursday Ukraine. Not a lot of interesting matchups outside of Greece.
Greece and
I think
maybe Italy. I haven't actually looked at Italy's roster.
Italy's
I don't know who they're. So is Gallo playing? I didn't look at who they're sending.
No, because he had that injury.
Yeah, right.
That's right. So yeah, but Giannis for Greece. So we'll see if Dario Saric could have won the NBA Finals. I think
yes,
that's what we're going to find out. And on
obviously,
Friday at 8 a.m.
You know, they've been doing these warm-up exhibition games for quite a while now. We're talking about like 3 straight weeks of exhibition games. And Dario's looked good in some of these highlights. You saw...
he looks skinny.
He looks...
man bun.
He got the man bun. We've talked about that before. But 10 or 15 pounds lighter. Kellen Olson last week posted a great clip of him in one game with like a spicy crossover, man. Showing some speed we've never seen from him before. So yeah, I'm really excited to watch him play. And yeah, ESPN Plus, it's $10 for a month. Like personally, what I'm doing right now is it works out really well for me because the U.S. Open is also going on right now. So it's kind of a crossover of my interests because ESPN has the rights. So I'm just paying for 1 month just to watch Eurobasket and the U.S. Open, and then
good idea.
I'll cancel at the end of the month. You know, I think it's a decent deal for being able to watch all the competition. And for anyone who wants to know how it works, there are 6 groups of 4, there are 4 groups of 6 teams rather. You have to play everyone in your group first, so that's why Croatia at a minimum will play these 5 games over the next week. At the end of that group stage, the top 4 teams from each group advance to a knockout stage where it's going to go 16, then 8, then 4, then 2, just like any typical tournament at that point. So minimum of 5 games played for Croatia. Maximum, if they made it theoretically all the way, they could play as many as 9 games. But I would say in general here, like Croatia is not a favorite to win. Even like to make the semis, you know, they'd have to go through someone really tough at some point. They'd have to beat, you know, a Serbia
Luka or Jokic.
Yeah, they'd have to beat a Slovenia or Serbia or Spain.
Slovenia won last time, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, they did.
Yep.
And Dragic is still there again, by the way. But, you know, like of the 24 teams that are going, a top 8 finish for Croatia. This is a team with Saric, but they've also got Bojan Bogdanovic. They've also got Zubac. They've got Mario Hezonja. You know, they have talent. I don't think a top 8 finish for them would be out of the question at all, and maybe they even make a Cinderella run led by our boy. We'll see.
Yeah. Yep. I think it'll be very interesting to watch. Hopefully he continues to play well, stays healthy, and then comes back. I think it'll be interesting to see. He's been playing a lot of power forward. We'll see how well he plays at that position because it's something that with some good backup centers for the Suns, it's something that he could end up doing quite a bit for the Suns this upcoming season. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, a segment that could not be avoided. We'll be right back.
Dread it. Run from it. Destiny still arrives.
Now the story of an NBA team that traded nothing, and the one thing that had no choice but to make them all better. It's Internal Development, Part 2.
Electric Boogaloo!
That's right, Internal Development 2, Electric Boogaloo. It's time to kick off Optimism season with episodes about the actual team. And that means, of course, we are joined by the great Gerald Bourguet, our friend, writer for PHNX website, and on their podcast, appears on their podcast, to talk about Cameron Johnson. Gerald, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, but I'm confused. I thought this was a Kevin Durant podcast. Is it not?
we finally don't have to do that.
Thank God.
We should make his name like Voldemort now, where you just can't say it. Like, you're not allowed. He who shall not be named. That's Kevin Durant from now on. We just can't even say it. But yes, Gerald, thank you for joining us. I think this is perfect timing. For those who don't remember, since it was like a year ago now, Gerald joined us last year for the initial internal development series to talk about Cameron Johnson. So bringing it back this year, of course, we had to ask Gerald to come back on to talk about him again. Now we have some sort of historical knowledge of what we talked about in the past, and I think it'll be an interesting conversation because Cameron Johnson had a really interesting season. But before we get to him directly, Gerald, how are you feeling just in general about the Suns this offseason so far?
I feel like I'm kind of one of the few people that actually still feels okay about the Suns. I mean, obviously, you can only feel so good after what we witnessed those last 5 games of that second round series. But, like, I feel like we've overcorrected a little bit based on that sample size. And not to say that it doesn't matter, but, man, this team has had 2 playoff runs together. And I know Chris Paul's getting old, and what we saw from him down the stretch was worrisome. But, like, this is still a very good team. This is still a title contending team. And I think if we didn't have those Kevin Durant rumors that popped up over the offseason, and if they had lost like game 7 on a buzzer beater instead of by like 35 or whatever it was, would we be singing a different tune? I feel like we would. And we can't play ifs because, as Devin Booker once famously said, if ifs were a fifth, we'd all be drunk. But, like, I feel like this team is better than people are giving them credit for, especially when, not to drop the name of the pod series here, but, like, I know people are sick of hearing internal development, but they legitimately have 4 young players, all of whom could conceivably take more steps, even including Devin Booker. So I still feel okay about this team. And, you know, even if you're not feeling good about running it back with basically the same core plus a healthy Dario, like, they still have the flexibility to make moves if one becomes available down the line. So, like, I'm not panicking over here, but I feel like I'm alone in that.
No, I'm glad you brought that up because I think kind of, you know, people are at different places, but they're all varying shades of more or less the same thing. Like, I think I've been one of the people who has been advocating for a trade the most recently, but even I think there's sort of common ground. Like, I'm not trying to panic either. I've said a bunch of times they should take their time and understand the flexibility that they have, and sort of the deadline to make that move now is the trade deadline, or even the deadline to improve your roster is the roster with which you head into next year's playoffs. It's not necessarily about going into this season with a completely different roster. But to that extent, you know, just trying to dig into it a little bit more, when you say you're okay about the Suns, do you mean, like, are you personally, speak for yourself, are you comfortable with fully running it back, or do you want that move
with
at
angry
some point?
Jae Crowder? Yeah,
or with angry Jae Crowder, or, you know, or do you want that move at some point? You just don't know exactly what it is yet.
I feel like you definitely have to be monitoring for moves, and I wouldn't turn one down if the right one presented. Like, if the Thunder decide, hey, we don't want to pay SGA what we promised him to pay over the next 4 or 5 years.
Absolutely.
And we're trying to, you know, Chet's out for the season. We're going to suck anyway. He wants to play for a better team. Like, if he becomes available, hell yeah, you throw.
Trade it all.
Yeah. Like, you
Trade
throw something at him and you are set for this year and for the conceivable future. But, like, it has to be the right move. Like, I've seen, you know, we saw the report or the rumor, a Western Conference executive thinking that Anthony Davis would be a Suns trade.
We just talked about that, yeah.
I'm just like, nah. Like, like 2 years ago.
SGA is so much better, yeah. And I think it's interesting with SGA, too, because if he becomes available closer to the trade deadline, then potentially DeAndre Ayton could be traded. The Suns have a lot more they can trade. Whereas with Kevin Durant, there was the massive complications of potentially hard capping them, DeAndre Ayton having to agree with it, notwithstanding, because it still exists. He has to agree with the trade there. But the Suns do have a lot of moving pieces that could be moved at the trade deadline if that were to happen. He's one of the guys that I think we've been beating the drum on the most, because it just makes sense, right? Doesn't it? It just makes sense. SGA, Devin Booker next to each other. Obviously, with Chris Paul, it gets a little complicated for a year with Chris Paul, but like Chris Paul's really close with SGA. They're really close friends. So I don't know. They could work it out, right?
Yeah. I think we're all on board with it, but like us being, the select people in the community, but kind of more broadly across the community, I haven't necessarily seen a lot of people supporting it. I think a lot of people just get stuck on the 3-guard thing again. I think there's this
he's
certain...
not available right now. I mean, that's the other part. We don't.
No,
really
he's.
know he is,
I want to make that clear too. He's definitely not available right now. It just feels like he could be available by the end of the year. But I think for some reason, like Suns fans have a 3-guard trauma. For some reason, we know what we know what the reason is.
Right?
We know what the reason is.
Even though the third, like the worst of this current trio would be better than the best of that former trio, but people.
Oh my God, this time it would work.
Yes,
and another reason it would work. Something I always said about the 3-guard lineup back in the day, like a big issue and an underrated issue with the one that McDonough assembled in 2015. If people haven't caught on, we're talking about Isaiah Thomas, Eric Bledsoe, and Goran Dragic. It's that you had 3 guys at the same exact stage of their careers, almost, who are all like 3 or 4 years apart in age.
Almost all stars, right?
Almost all what?
Almost all stars. None of them were all stars.
Almost all stars.
They're all trying to be. Yeah.
They all had their own financial incentives. They all had their own ulterior motives to demand as many touches as possible. What you never had a team experiment with, and which would be much more interesting, is having one of those guys be a 37 or 38-year-old who's ready to take a back seat and focus more on mentorship, which I think Chris Paul very, very well could be interested in doing, and then you have the 2 young guys who get to grow in their careers. So,
the one team that did experiment with that is OKC, in that they played a lot of 3-guard lineups with Dennis Schroeder and Chris Paul and SGA. So that's something that did work for that team, but they did have a lot less good players. And I think the concept of Mikal Bridges at power forward is where a lot of people get stuck as well. So I understand the complications there. Maybe Mikal Bridges isn't on the team in that case. Maybe that's the reason you get SGA. But I do think it's an interesting one. Let's talk about Cameron Johnson. We're going to do it the same as last year, possibly at least a little bit truncated version, because we did go, I was telling Gerald before we recorded, we went 75 minutes on Cameron Johnson last year. But there was 3 questions that we talked about. It's who is he, what can he improve on, and how confident are we that he'll improve on things? Because I think part of the conversation is, yes, he can improve on lots of things, but like some of those are more realistic than others when it comes to improvements. So let's first talk about who he is. And there's one thing that we have to talk about right off the bat. It's the same thing we started the last episode with. He's a 3-point shooter. The interesting part about talking about him as a 3-point shooter this year rather than last year is that now we have the evidence of it. In that, in the season they made the NBA Finals, he was essentially shooting the same percentage as Jae Crowder. And in that episode, to your credit, Gerald, you said that sometime in the next 5 years, Cameron Johnson could lead the league in 3-point percentage. And for the majority of this last season, he did. And as far as volume shooters, he actually led the league. He ended the season on 42.5% on 391 attempts. Gerald, take a victory lap on that one. You nailed that. He did it as early as the next season. Of course, the season ended. He fell behind. I think it was Desmond Bane, and so I think that was who it was. And maybe somebody else was at the top of that list. But good job on that one, Gerald.
Yeah, I was so close. I think he finished like 4th among all qualified players, so I was right there. But as far as the volume shooting goes, he almost made me look like a prophet, so that was pretty nice of him to do that.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, 3-point shooting, it's there now. Like I think you can say Luke Kennard, I think, was the number 1. I just looked it up. But yeah, I think you could say that the 3-point shooting is there. 391 attempts, 42.5%. Sam, what else stands out to you as far as who Cameron Johnson is?
Besides shooting?
Yeah, or whatever you want to talk about. If you have more to add with shooting.
Well, I mean, just one stat I was going to throw out was shooting. He shot 46%. Like, I think you know the deal at this point. We look at the B-ball index data with a lot of these guys because it's just useful data. So, I was looking at what are his biggest strengths first. He's an A+ rated perimeter shooter, according to B-ball index, and I wanted to dig more into why that is. He shot 46% on catch and shoot threes. I thought the more interesting thing about it only 12% of his attempts, according to B-Ball Index, were actually open, according to what their definition of openness is. Their definition of openness is a little bit different than the NBA website's definition of openness, which uses slightly different tracking data. But anyway, what that shows to me is two things. One, he has raised his percentage, right? He's hitting more shots. That's great. That's step one. There are many players around the league who shoot a good percentage from three, sometimes even on high volume, but continue to not have any shooting gravity, however, because all of their shots are always open. And so I think it's a really, really good sign that this second part of the equation has now clicked into place for Cam as well, which is that he's consistently getting tough threes, and or at least tough threes in the catch and shoot sense, you know what I mean? Like consistently contested threes, and he's making them anyway because it adds so much more pressure and gravity to the Suns' offense and allows him to maybe potentially add other interesting things to his game in the way of closeouts or attacking closeouts or playmaking or just, more space for Booker to operate and all that other good stuff. So that's where I wanted to start. Do you have anything to add there before we move on to other aspects of his game?
Yeah, I think the thing, and the reason that I had faith in his three-point shooting, because you pointed out that he did not shoot the ball if you just look at the percentages well last year. But when you looked at, the kind of ebb and flow of his numbers there, he finished the year 15 for 76 when he was dealing with that wrist thing. And before that, he had been shooting just under 40%. And I felt like he was going, once he was healthy and could stay healthy, he was going to show it. And he got off to a rough start at the beginning of the season. And to your point, Sam, about being able to shoot despite not being very open, one of the big things, the recurring themes that kept coming up from Monty and some of the other coaches and even the players early in the season was just shoot the fucking ball. Like, they're closing out on you hard, but you're 6'8", 6'9", you can shoot over them and you have that quick release. Just shoot over them anyway. Or I guess in Monty's terms, it would be shoot the freaking ball. But it was it was kind of like a light flicked on for Cam Johnson, because then he got back on track. He had this amazing shooting season, should have been in the 3-point contest. And I think that now, like you're saying, is the time for him to add this next element into his game, as far as, because he's a very good finisher. That's another thing that Cam Johnson is, just looking at the numbers and looking at B-Ball Index as well. They rate him highly in most of the categories as far as contact, finishing at the rim, adjusted field goal percentage at the rim, all those things. He checks out as like an A player. The problem is he just doesn't get there enough. And so I think now, as a great shooter, guys are going to be frantically closing out on him. The next step is being able to put it on the floor and putting that, very good finishing of his to use.
Yeah, I think it's a great point just to have him shoot. It was one of my biggest pet peeves with Cameron Johnson when he first got to the league, and I think we talked about it in the past a lot. But he doesn't need that much time to be open, and oftentimes the closeouts, when he still does shoot, just result in a 4-point play or 3 free throws as well, because they can't slow down if he's still shooting. They expect him to move, and it's not just necessarily when they're closing out. It's that sliver of space behind handoffs and screens where he has some time to shoot as well, where he was taking a moment to decide what to do. And I think that has gone away. And I think you're right that 391 attempts, it's a career high for him. Interestingly, you talked about it on the last episode, what you mentioned now, the wrist injury in the previous season, where he started out well, got the wrist injury, and ended the season shooting really poorly. In some ways, a similar thing happened this year. Played really well throughout the season, kind of peaked in the Knicks game where he was kneed in the thigh by Mitchell Robinson, and then missed way more games than you would think for the injury that we saw, and then came back and didn't quite hit the peak that he was at before. And it'll be interesting to see how he does next season, especially if he starts, which I think we're all assuming that he is going to start. Actually, I shouldn't speak for you, Gerald. Do you think he's going to start?
I think it's probably time, and I was going to say that before you factor in all the Jae Crowder social media stuff we've been seeing over the last few weeks, because we honestly, at first I was kind of dismissive of it, and now it's become more of a pattern, so I'm like, okay, maybe there's some problems there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's probably time. I think one of the things that Monty mentioned in his exit interviews that stood out to me was talking about, watching the Celtics, watching the Warriors. They have 3 or 4 guys that you can just swing the ball to, and they can go and get a bucket. And the Suns didn't really have that outside of Chris Paul and Devin Booker. And so he was saying, I thought we put guys like McHale and Cam and Landry in these positions where they could do that, but apparently we didn't do it enough. And so I think that's going to be a bigger factor for them, hopefully experimenting a little more with that kind of thing next year.
Yeah. I do want to say, and then Sam, I'm going to let you get to what else you were going to talk about there, but we recorded our intro. We took a quick break, and then we came back to talk with Gerald. And in that time, Jae Crowder deleted his Instagram.
That's tough.
So the Jae Crowder roller coaster continues. But Sam, you had more about Cameron Johnson.
Oh my God, dude. Look, the other thing kind of Gerald already nailed for me, which is just talking about finishing. I mean, Cam's a sturdy body, and we could talk about maybe if he needs to attack more in general, but like he shot 75% in the restricted area last season, which was a career high, and that's kind of as good as it gets for a player who's not a rim running center. You know what I mean? Like that's really
good. It's really good.
That's really, really good.
Yeah.
I think where it starts to get difficult as we maybe transition a little bit more into the things he has to work on is that, with what Gerald was just bringing up, that Monty wants to put these guys in positions to score. Well, we've seen a really good track record, I think, with Cam's ability to attack closeouts at this point in a limited sample size, and with his ability to occasionally rise over the top of guys. However, kind of the one dribble pull-up game, the mid-range game, all of the in-between stuff that you need to be a true triple threat and a true playmaking hub, and, kind of like more of a secondary, tertiary guy in the offense. A lot of that stuff from Cam left a lot to be desired last season, right? So there really is a lot to talk about on both sides, and I guess we'll just see the extent to which he can develop all of those facets.
So he's in the 95th percentile of adjusted field goal percentage, like finishing at the rim, essentially. It's 76%, I think, within 3 feet, which is just insanely good. And the way they judge contact at the rim, he actually rates out really highly on that before, which we've talked about before. He's the guy on the team that gets the posters. Like, he's the one that does it the most. This last season, not as many as previous seasons, but not for the lack of trying. I think maybe defenders are figuring it out a little more and maybe getting out of the way. I think his finishing this last season also was a little more creative. We saw more, I posted some highlights on Twitter today. We saw some more Euro steps, some interesting up and unders, and different things that he was doing at the rim previously. And something I want to talk about, because Gerald, I think I was similar to you in that I think I maybe undersold what Cameron Johnson could do as a starter in comparison to Jae Crowder, because I do think taking Jae Crowder out of the starting lineup in general makes the Suns a less balanced team, in that they just become a team that is not as good defensively. But the levels to which Cameron Johnson is better on offense than Jae Crowder can really not be understated. There really isn't a single area offensively that Cameron Johnson isn't better than Jae Crowder on. He's a better shooter. He's better at dribbling. He's better. He's better.
Give him the
at driving.
floater, man. Come on.
The one thing, actually, mid-range. We'll talk about mid-range in a second. But the one thing you can say Jae Crowder is better at is mid-range shooting. But like, you don't really need that from Cameron Johnson necessarily in the role that he's playing. He's better at passing. Like, he's also a good and creative passer. Jae Crowder, a pretty good passer. But you know what else he does? One or two dumb passes a game. Yeah. Like, he just does that every once in a while. He's a little overconfident in his passing. So while I still think the versatility you lose, which is having two guys on the team that can defend two stars on the other team defensively, and you lose that versatility with Cameron Johnson just taking Jae Crowder's place, you just do. There's no way around that. There really isn't.
Yeah, no, I completely agree.
But the offensive difference is massive. I can't understate that.
No, it is, and I think, like, you just look at the numbers that he put up during that stretch when he was starting. It was kind of an eye opener. Like, oh shit, okay, this guy might be ready to arrive here. And I think when Jae Crowder came back, they kind of went back to the status quo because that starting five was really good and because they needed Cam Johnson off the bench with the way that Cam Payne played at that point and pretty much all season except for the stretch where he filled in for Chris Paul and was great. And that's the one concern that I have is okay, was last year Cam Payne coming back to kind of regression to the mean, or was that just a bad season? Can he go back to the campaign of 2 years ago when he was fantastic and you don't, because I feel like if you get that campaign again, Jae Crowder coming off the bench is not a big deal. But if you get last year's campaign and you downgrade from Cam Johnson to Jae Crowder on the bench, maybe that's not a big deal in the playoffs. It is in the regular season when you need kind of that depth and that scoring punch that Cam Johnson provides. But even with all that, I'm still of the mind that it's time to switch things up. You can't just run it back with the same roster and the same playing style and not experiment, not test things, not put Cam Johnson in a position where he can really make that leap. Because I think some of us thought it might be last year. I thought Jae Crowder was still going to be the starter, but I think this is the year where it kind of has to be this year, not even factoring all the contract stuff and trade rumors, but his shooting, his gravity is going to open up a ton. It's going to make life a little bit easier for an aging Chris Paul. The gravity between him and DA is going to be insane when they share the floor together with those three. So
the Spain pick and roll. Yeah,
yes.
we know what it's going to look like. Yeah.
It's going to be constant. Yep.
So I'm all for it. There are some definite areas, he only got to the rim. I think 19% of his shots were at the rim, according to Cleaning the Glass, which was only in the 17th percentile at his position. If you're that good at finishing, that number kind of has to go up, and the Suns have to find a way to do it where they don't kind of neuter him as this 3-point shooter.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an interesting conversation because I have some thoughts on that too when we talk about how he can improve. Can we talk about his defense too? But
sure.
Sam, go ahead if you have something else to add there.
I wanted to just really quickly on the note about campaign, Gerald, for the listeners at home who may be curious, that because we didn't actually say it, Mike, so I want to say it here.
Yeah.
Last year, this was a 5-part series. Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and campaign. This year, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but I believe what we said is we'll make it a 4-part series. And I think that kind of speaks to where we're at with campaign right now, which is not that we're no longer rooting for him or that, we don't wish him to, but I think we've reset the expectations to close to zero.
His playoffs are so good, I think he earned one. And we talked about that at the time. He earned that episode. Maybe, Sam, we should combine Dario Saric and Cameron Payne into one episode talking about how they play off of each other, because the whole time Gerald was talking about it. Yeah. The whole time Gerald was talking about it, I'm like, the pressure's on, Dario. You got to figure this out. It's your job to figure out how to make both Cameron Payne and Jae Crowder effective on offense if they come off the bench together. But defensively, it's interesting. I went back and I listened to the episode from last year, and I think we could almost just play that defensive segment here because I feel essentially exactly the same about it, in that he can move his feet. He's not a bad defender. He's a smart defender. He's not an overly positive defender. But the difference is, and look, I don't want to make our analysis all about the series against the Mavericks. I think in some ways a lot of analysis suffered from that in making it all about the Bucks last year. But we did see Luka Doncic just kind of destroy Cameron Johnson over and over and over again in the playoffs. And I think what we saw actually kind of plays out in the stats that, Basketball Index does a real interesting thing in that it rates out these players' defensive abilities against different player archetypes. And Cameron Johnson is actually a really highly rated defender on slashers, which is kind of interesting. Guarding someone like Miles Bridges, for example, he'll do better than guarding someone like Luka Doncic, who's more of a shot creator. And I think that's the exact thing with Cameron Johnson, where I think when we talked about his defense previously, and we can use this, of course, to transition in what he can improve on, I think we were coming at it from the perspective of he doesn't need to guard LeBron James or Anthony Davis. But now maybe he does. And when we add that perspective to it, Does it change, Gerald, how you feel about his defense going forward?
A little bit, and I think because of, I swear, sometimes we have this problem where pre-draft perceptions of a player's, the way that we scout them when they're heading into their first year in the league, they stick with us a little bit longer than maybe they should. Because I know when we were talking about, I don't remember how in-depth we got into the defensive side last year, but I know when we brought it up, we all kind of agreed that, like, coming into the draft, like, defensive expectations for him weren't high. We knew he was a smart player, but we knew, like, the hips could be a problem, the lateral movement could be a thing, and we were all kind of impressed with what we had seen so far in his career as far as being able to stick with guys. And when you come at it from that angle, like, yeah, he's an average defender. He's a good enough defender on a very good defensive team. But, like, now if the conversation is he needs to be starting, he needs to be playing the 4 spot, and he needs to be able to hold his own against wings and against, you know, much bigger, stronger players, the concern level rises a little bit. Like, I think that's why they need to start him, is they need to see, especially with the contract situation still being in the air, like, is this a guy that can be a small ball 4 long term, or, like, can we survive with him and Mikhail being our wing duo at the 3-4 for the foreseeable future? And the truth is, I don't know. I think so, because I think the offense is good enough and the defense is okay enough for them to survive. But, like, in truth, we don't know, because we haven't seen the full wear and tear of a regular season. We haven't seen the playoff grind. And what we did see from last year's playoffs was, you know, a team like the Mavs are going to target him with Luka, and they're going to go at him a lot. He's going to have to be able to hold up a lot better than he did in that series. Not that anyone was really stopping Luka that series. He was just torching everybody.
Yeah.
But it is an area of concern for me, and not just the defense. We can talk about this in a bit, but the rebounding side of things as well. Cam Johnson is not a great rebounder. He definitely needs to improve in that regard if he's going to get that spot long term.
Average, I think.
Yeah.
You could call it that. Sam, what do you think defensively?
Yeah, I mean, look, he fits. Ultimately, we're talking about a guy who logs a lot of minutes on what was the 3rd best defensive team in the NBA last season. He's obviously good. I think we can start from a starting point of good. And I think he's demonstrated that throughout the seasons, in the sense that the Suns deploy him in switchable schemes that ask him to guard all sorts of positions. The issue is, I guess I would feel better about this if it's almost not fair to talk about Cam Johnson in this way, because it's not so much about him as it's about, like, other guys in the Suns defense need to fit around Chris Paul. And unfortunately, Chris Paul is at an area or in this, you know, late era of his career where he just needs to hide on guys in the corner all the time. Right? I mean, like, and it sucks to have a guy who is so reliant on doing that on defense, who is also so important, who is literally the engine of your offense in many ways at the same time, because that's the thing that is consistently forcing Cam Johnson into these unfavorable matchups on the perimeter. If it were not for that, if you had a point guard who is, I know this is, like, impossible to find, right? So easier said than done. But if you had a point guard who, like, had Chris Paul's offensive impact but was also 6'4", this would not be an issue. But it is an issue, and it's an issue that we have to deal with. And unfortunately, yeah, you know, we can talk all we want about how much better Cam is on offense than Jae Crowder, and that's absolutely true. But we also all know at the end of the day, you are giving something back on the other end.
Well, I do think, like, it's easy to pinpoint your analysis and say, well, he couldn't guard Luka Doncic, but I think Gerald just nailed it. Nobody can. You just can't. I think he was killing everyone on that team. He takes a whole team to do it. And on the other side of that ball, if we're talking about that series real quick, they were trapping Devin Booker, and one pass away was Jae Crowder. And when Jae Crowder is one pass away, the ball is in Jae Crowder's hands way too much.
Yep.
And I think you have to boil down what a player can do on both sides of the ball when analyzing how they fit into a lineup. And at a certain point, I was asking for Cameron Johnson to start in that series by game 3. And I still think it might have been something that they should have tried. I don't know that if it would have ended the series for them, but it does feel a little bit like feeding him to, like, a shark by throwing him like some chum in the water with Cameron Johnson. But I think what he brings offensively is important. Now, one thing I will say when we're talking about what he can improve on is you got to wonder about his durability. Now, this is not necessarily his fault, but if you're putting him in at power forward, that means he is guarding significantly larger players on a regular basis, and he has had injuries in the last few seasons. And just sort of playing up. Now, he's tall enough to play power forward, but he doesn't really have the bulk and the strength to do it on a regular basis. You got to question whether that is something that he can stay healthy. I don't know. What do you think, Gerald? What do you think about his durability?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, whenever they play the Knicks, just sit him that night. Keep him the hell away from that entire team, Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson. Don't let them anywhere near him.
Well, if Sam gets his way...
It won't be an issue
Julius
for Julius.
Randle will be on the team.
Well, I guess if I get my way, he won't be starting. We haven't thought enough
That's
about
true.
that. But
that's interesting.
But no, I think it's a valid question as far as his durability, because every season it has been some, I don't want to say fluke injury. They have mostly been through contact and through the game, which is good. But it is like you have to wonder if he can hold up through a full regular season, especially if he's trying to help out on the glass more, which they would definitely need if he's your starting four. Playing bigger players, like that's a lot to put a guy like that through, especially when he's got to be, nimble on the perimeter and finding his spots. That he's so good at leaking out and kind of, I don't know what the right word, but the way he shades all around the perimeter to find the open spot, like that calls for the energy to do that. As a shooter, you need your legs, and he would be giving up a good amount of that on the defensive end now. I think, but that again, it's a question I can't really answer, but it's one that I feel like that's part of the reason why I'm so adamant that the Suns should be starting him this upcoming season, because you got to find out. Like you cannot give him, you can't give him like a big contract extension or even trade him away without really knowing the answer to that question, I feel like. So for me, that's
the looming
big
question
thing.
too. The extension is still out there. Like, what are they going to
Right.
do with that? Sam, when you think about what he can improve on, what comes to mind?
I kind of want to use this opportunity to talk about, because we were just talking about durability and the two are so intertwined, rebounding. And actually, like, I think the reason I want to almost bounce it off you guys is because, like, technically speaking, Cam averaged 5.7 rebounds per 36 last year, which is not good. That's like not good for, a guy who you're thinking might be a starting four. However, watching film, Gerald was just talking about his ability to leak out, his ability to play in transition. He's always posted like good, efficient stats there. Offensively, obviously, if we just want to put him in place where he's like chucking threes, which I'm totally fine with, and he's a total floor spacer, you can't expect many raw offensive rebounds, right? So I guess I've never gotten the impression that Cam Johnson is actually a bad rebounder, despite the stats saying that. And I think he could improve that number this year. It would take some sacrifice, though, to get there. So, like, I could see Cam Johnson being a 7 or 8 rebound per game guy if you put him in a different scheme that focuses a little bit less on the shooting, a little bit less on the offensive impact leaking
Put him on the
out.
Raptors, basically.
And I think he would be okay. But I also don't know if maybe that seems unreasonable to you guys, or if you disagree with that notion.
He's athletic. He can jump high. He doesn't have overly long arms, like not a lot of length.
Like, I
that,
don't think he'll be good, to be clear. I just think he could be fine.
I think he's we talked about him being sneaky, creeping around offensively on our last episode when we talked a year ago. And I think in some respects, he does that on rebounds too. He's kind of sneaky, sneaking around guys and stealing rebounds, which actually is kind of really good and interesting. But I think you bring up a good point in that, like, I think that if Cameron Johnson spends a year in the starting lineup with the Suns, I think they could have like the best offense in the NBA. Like that lineup could be the best offensive lineup in the NBA. And at some point, just lean into that. Like, lean hard into it. If that means giving up a few offensive rebounds, maybe that's okay, because you're just burying teams in offense over and over again.
Can I support that notion with a stat real quick? I just saw this, and like, it makes sense based on what we all watch, but it surprised even me. Like, the Suns' projected opening day starting five is Chris Paul and Devin Booker, two guys who we don't need to question what they can do offensively, right? And then three guys who all ranked top 15 in the entire league in true shooting percentage last year among qualified players.
Yeah.
DeAndre Ayton,
Jeez.
Cam Johnson,
Yeah.
Mikal Bridges were 7th, 11th, and 15th, I
Wow.
think,
Yep.
in true shooting.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what the Suns' offense, just their and okay, their bench is a bit of a problem, I'm gonna admit. But just the starting lineup has the potential to be astronomically good, like off the charts amazing.
Well, once they trade Jae Crowder for Max Strus, the offense on the bench could get a little better. I'm going to say something about Cameron Johnson since we're on offense real quick. This is something that I think, like Cameron Johnson, at worst, he's like the second best shooter on the Suns, right? Like you could only really put Devin Booker maybe ahead of him. And then in some respects, I think Chris Paul, you got to give the respect to. Maybe he's third best. But mid-range shooting, Cameron Johnson last year. The Suns were maybe the best mid-range shooting team of all time. Cameron Johnson, do you guys want to guess where Cameron Johnson ranked
Oh, I know.
in mid-range shooting
I
percentage?
looked it up.
Where he ranked, that's going to be tough because I know he took a note. This was one of the areas where I was definitely off because he improved from the prior year to last year, and then the next year he just tanked. But I'm going to
it's
guess
weird.
It's bad.
It's bad.
Do you want to guess the percentage, Gerald?
Ooh, like percentile.
The percentage,
No, like
just like
the
what he
actual
shot from
percentage
mid-range.
he
According
shot
to
on mid-range.
NBA.com, which is where I got the stat.
Okay, so
I got the same one.
See, I have the one from Cleaning the Glass that factors out garbage time, so I don't want to cheat because it'll be
okay.
close. It'll probably be close, but it's not. I know that on Cleaning the Glass it was 33%, so it's not great.
It's much worse than that.
No,
According to NBA.com, they have him shooting 19% from mid-range, which
God.
is 15th on the Suns.
oh,
15th on the Suns, just under Elfrid Payton. Which, okay, now I'm going to say, I don't care about this because it's just a weird stat. It's not like a ton of volume to where you can say that it's indicative of who he's going to be in the future, I don't think in any way. And I think that he only really shot mid-range when he had to. When he was driving on closeouts, it was with ill intent. He was trying to kill someone at the rim. And so it's just an odd stat where I think if you look at who he could be offensively, I think one of the biggest questions obviously is, can he handle the ball when it comes to pick and rolls? And right now, as a ball handler, according to NBA.com, the points per possession when he's a ball handler in pick and rolls, which is not very often, like once every other game, is 0.72. And I don't think even that stat I don't think really matters too much. 'Cause I think a lot of these missed mid-range shots probably came off of that specific play. And I think if you're giving him one every 2 games, like you're not actually testing out whether he could be good on the ball in pick and rolls. But like these are some stats that point to not a great sign of that happening. But if you want him to be like an important offensive hub for this team, he might not have to do that, to be 100% honest. There are other ways for him to be effective, but it would be really nice if he was capable of 1, dribbling the ball on the pick and roll, and 2, shooting from mid-range in that case in order to open up the floor for everyone else.
yeah. I mean, I was looking at because I wanted to see just the spectrum of where he was getting his shots from. Obviously, like 60-some% was from 3, but where was he getting the rest of his shots? And as I mentioned before, according to Cleaning the Glass, it was 19% at the rim and 20% from the mid-range, which they define as shots in the 4 to 14 feet range. So not exactly the mid-range, but that's how they define it.
Yeah, those ones closer to the rim are probably what made the difference there between 19 and 33%. I'm guessing.
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming. But that 20% of his shots mid-range, 19% at the rim, that can't be the case if he's only shooting 33% on those shots. Like, that's where I don't know whether it's a floater or whether it's taking that extra dribble and embracing more contact, but getting to the rim more is big for him unless, he wants to bounce back because he shot 50% on that same range the year before, and then he dropped to 33%.
Yeah.
So
that's why it's hard to like know what's real in that stat.
He's
right?
definitely better than 19.
Yes, yes, I agree with that. Yeah,
like-
that's a good point. Yeah.
But it's just the difference between like at the NBA level, a 45% mid-range shooter. I'm going to use this in the way that the NBA defines it because I know Cleaning the Glass, their data is good too. It's just I know that they include the paint. And kind of when I think about mid-range shooting, I don't really think about the paint all that much. I'm kind of thinking about everything outside of it. Mm-hmm. That's how the NBA website defines it as far as I know. Like a 45% mid-range shooter at the NBA level is good. It might not seem amazing, 0.9 points per possession or whatever, but that's an above average mid-range shooter. And is he a 35% guy or is he closer to maybe getting up to being a 45% guy? That's a big whopping difference in terms of someone you want to give these opportunities to consistently versus someone who you absolutely don't want handling the ball in these situations.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I always am kind of err on the side of like more versatility is better, especially because I know the way Monty deploys both Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges. He uses them so often at the elbow and he uses them so often in these handoff plays and with these pin downs where it's like we know there's that play where Cam catches at the elbow and is designed to get to the rim. But what if he didn't have to get to the rim every time, right? It would add another more interesting flow.
More versatility. Yeah.
To the Suns' offense, right? I think that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I know like this stuff is limited sample size, but like when I look at the mid-range data, I'm not like to me this is a potential capping stat. Mm-hmm. It's really good that we know that Cam's finishing is like incredible, right? Like what that says to us essentially is that he's going to be a guy who sticks around in the NBA for a long time because he's not just a shooter. He has something else to fall back on. But if you can't do the mid-range stuff, then like you're just not at a certain point. You're not
a star.
You're not going to be the guy in the offense, or maybe even the second or the third guy in the offense. It's just kind of that's how it is.
Right. And I actually, because when we talked to Cam, I think it was the end of July, he gave us a lot of good stuff, not just about, being involved in trade rumors, but how he was spending his summer. And he was kind of talking about, opening himself up to criticism or, pointers as far as where he could improve his game, how he needs to help. And it sounded like he and Monty are kind of on the same page as far as, we need more out of you. So he said, I hear everything, guys. I'm not going to act like I don't hear everything. So, like, you've got to work on being somebody that can be relied on late in games, somebody that can be relied on as an additional ball-dominant player. Trust me, I was a ball-dominant player for the first 18, 19 years of my life, and then I was like, okay, become better at the other stuff. And now it's like, okay, get back to what you were doing in high school. The thing is, every hooper knows this. If you don't do something for a while, you'll start to lose it. So when you start doing it again, it's like, oh, I got this. So working on that stuff, it's been a lot of fun. So we hear from players all the time that, they're working on everything in their game, and it's the worst response ever when we get those. But, like, he understands that, like, I need to do more with the rock in my hands. I need to be able to create a little bit more. And he was talking about how he would spend, he likes that they actually have an off season this time, not this condensed, couple of weeks to prepare for a new season, but a real off season where he can spend an hour just working on one bit of footwork and not move on to the next thing until he gets it down. So I'm hoping that I'm right on this, but I do think we'll see Monty put Mikal and Cam in a little bit different situations and let them create a little bit more, not only because they need to take the load off Chris Paul, but just because they need to have that extra versatility come playoff time this time around.
It helps, by the way, with Cam that just like something we've never ever questioned with him. I was thinking as you were reading out that quote, his self-awareness, his professionalism,
and work ethic.
These are attributes in Cam Johnson that no one has ever questioned. I mean, it's one of the reasons he was drafted as high as he was, for sure.
Now, let me just say though, having said all that about mid-range, he shot 391 3-point attempts. There should not be, in the next 5 seasons of his career, there should not be a season where he shoots under 500 attempts. Preferably 600 attempts. And I know that sounds like a lot, but like
that's a lot.
Sadiq Bey took 610 threes this last year. And that was
a
on
50-point game.
And that was and that was on an average of, let's see, 7.4 3-point attempts per game. It's funny, Basketball Reference does like this 2022-2023 projection on what they expect players to do. For Cameron Johnson, it projects 8 3-point attempts per game. This is just projecting out based on minutes. Cameron Johnson's 391 attempts is on, bench player minutes, technically. But like 2015, 2016, Klay Thompson took 650 3-point attempts. Cameron Johnson should be within 150 3-point attempts of that. And and it is an interesting thing. So you're right in that Monty has this sort of balancing act that he has to run with Cameron Johnson, in that he has to figure, and this is everyone on the team, as this internal development series uncovers every year now, I guess. But you have to sort of balance the development on the ball with what they're good at. And I think for Cameron Johnson, he just has to launch threes. And when he's in the starting lineup, I think you can make the case that he's just going to be open from that 3-point line more now as well, just with playing more with the 3 largest gravity players on the team in Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton, and that's just going to give him more attempts. So as much as I would like him to be great at the mid-range shot, in the role that he's currently going to play, he's got to launch those threes. He's got to really, really launch those threes. And it's tough, too. I think part of this is he shot 29% on pull-up threes this last year. But, not a lot of attempts of pull-up threes as well. But to me, when he's handling the ball, I would almost prefer that he's looking for a pull-up 3 still. And just putting that kind of pressure on them to the extent where as soon as he's holding the ball behind the 3-point line, the defense is terrified that he's going to launch a 3. And even if that brings his overall 3-point percentage down to 39% or something like he was his rookie year, that's fine. Because if it's 39% on 600 3-point attempts, that's pretty good. I think we'll be okay with that. That's a good player, I would say. So I don't know. Do you guys agree with that or disagree with that? I would love to hear what you think of that.
I'm personally of the opinion if you can get Cam Johnson more 3-point shot attempts, do it all the time, every time.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes back to something I wrote about it was like the week or two after the off season or the season ended. And because I was looking through the numbers and obviously defense was the bigger issue in that series, their downfall. But looking at the offense, we knew they were this elite mid-range team, right? And that they were infallible. They had some of the best mid-range shooters in the league outside of just Chris Paul and Devin Booker. Mm-hmm. But I was looking at, I think it's Cleaning the Glass that has this, what is it called? It's like location field goal percentage or something like that. But basically it weighs, it's location effective field goal percentage. And so it takes into account that 3-pointers normally are worth more than 2s, and then location adds in their shot profile basically. So if you shot a league average percentage from every shot on the floor, how good of a shooting team would you be based on where you're spreading your shots out? And the Suns had an effective field goal percentage that was 3rd, but their location effective field goal percentage was dead last in the NBA because of all the mid-range shots they took, because they didn't get to the rim, they didn't take enough threes, and they didn't get to the free throw line. So, if you're not doing...
They really were a historical outlier in that way, by the way.
Mm-hmm. One of the best mid-range shooting teams of all time.
Right. They were insane. They were aesthetically pleasing for all the Kobe and DeMar DeRozan throwbacks, but, in terms of actually making life easier on you come playoff time, they didn't do that. And I feel like Cam Johnson is kind of the epitome. I'd never want to limit a player's game, and I think if he can prove that he can put the ball on the floor, pull up for that mid-range jumper and be effective at it, by all means continue. But I wouldn't be opposed to them restricting him to the James Harden Houston Rockets shot profile.
It is kind of fascinating.
He does it on his own. That's kind of how he plays.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of fascinating because, this entire time, I do feel like Cam, his bread and butter, is going to continue to be the transition threes, the pick and pop threes, the catch and shoot stuff. Mm-hmm. But this whole time we've been talking about, for the past year, what if the Suns added Eric Gordon?
Yeah.
What if the Suns added Jordan Clarkson? And now you guys are kind of telling me, well, what if Cam Johnson was the Jordan Clarkson the entire time?
Mm-hmm. The Jordan Clarkson was the Cam Johnson we made along the way. I think that's true. I think you kind of got to do it at some point. It is with Monty. I don't want him to say, here's how we test these guys. Just give them more mid-range shooting, because that's kind of what they did with Mikal Bridges last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily think that is the way to go, because I think it limits attempts at the rim, specifically for Mikal Bridges, which of course we're going to have an episode about him in the future. And I think for Cameron Johnson, like him wanting to get to the rim and doing what he can to get to the rim, that's a good thing that he wants to do. So it is, I think, as far as development goes, you know, it's okay if he's just launching a ton of threes, maybe some that you would consider slightly ill-advised, because it just the pressure that it forces defenses. It's the Miami Heat way, right? They with Max Strus, with Duncan Robinson shot like 29% last year, but he never stopped shooting those threes, because it still affected their offense positively, because defenses were still bending to the will of that shot attempt.
And the difference, of course, is now that you've developed Cam to a point where you do trust his defense to at least be solid, he's not Duncan Robinson. It doesn't matter if he's missing his threes. You know, he's a guy who can stay and play on both ends, which is a privilege that the Miami Heat did not always have with some of their shooters.
Yeah. And I saw the highlights you were posting earlier, Mike, and I was kind of it like jogged my memory for a minute, some of the things that he did off the dribble, especially that like step back crossover three that he hit just off the dribble by himself on an island. I was like, shit, let's see more of that. I don't even care if he makes it. Like, just let him do it more.
At least once a game, right? Instead of once every 5 games or 6 games.
One
or
step
like
back
that.
3 a game. That would be so dope, dude.
Yeah, if he makes one every 3 games, that's an effective shot, right? That's still a good shot.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I posted is an isolation, which I think it's James Harden type shot. It's not even with a screen. You know, it was just
in case you guys are
one-on-one.
curious. Cam Johnson ran 10 isolation possessions all of last season, according to the NBA's website. But he scored 1.5 points per possession, which ranks in the 100th percentile.
Yeah. Boy.
So,
well, I think you could
perhaps
test him in isolation a little bit too, actually. I do think that. Because according to B-Ball Index, the effective field goal percentage in his isolations was 65%, basically. And you're right, not enough attempts, but at a certain point... And I think, and this is a theory Sam and I had, or at least I had on our previous episode, but I think when it comes to Chris Paul, it's almost better that he doesn't play some games than just tries to take a back seat, because his off ball, he's just not effective off the ball. And if he takes back-to-backs off and stuff like that, then you're kind of forcing guys like Cameron Johnson or Mikal Bridges to do more instead of just rely on Chris Paul when he's in. Mm-hmm. And, that's the kind of times where you can test out some of those isolations and stuff like that. And it should be interesting. I know we're already running long, which is no surprise. But I do want to quickly talk about what I think we feel confident in him improving on. Mm-hmm. And I'll break it down. If you guys disagree with me, feel free to say it. But I feel like what he did shooting, like percentile, 42.5%, maybe that I could see that being like the top that he has in his career, but only because the attempts should be going up dramatically. So I think overall, from a shooting perspective, I think he's a better three-point shooter than we even saw. I don't think he's a 19% mid-range shooter, so I think his mid-range shooting could go up from that perspective a little bit more. The things I think I would feel slightly less confident in him improving on, I think he could get a little bit better on defense, but I'm not sure that we're far away from what his peak could be defensively. But beyond that, I think those are the things that I feel. What do you think, Gerald?
Yeah, I definitely think the mid-range thing, it certainly can't get any worse than that.
Yeah.
I think we might see either more shots at the rim this season and maybe the efficiency, falls off a little bit, but I think we'll see more shots at the rim, and I think we might see more floaters, because if there's an emphasis on him attacking off the dribble a little bit more, I think there might be a reason why he's not at the rim all the time. Like, he's hunting for bodies when he's down there for sure, but if he's also dealing with the wear and tear of starting as a 4, maybe he's not as keen to mix it up as much among the trees. So we might see a little bit of a floater. And
26 minutes he played last season per game, and that's the most in his career. If he's starting, we need that over 30.
Yes,
at the
30
very
minimum.
least. Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt.
But I also think, and I think you're right about the 3-point percentage, that might be as good as it gets, but I do think we will hopefully see a big uptick in 3-point attempts at maybe around 40%. I'm very high on how good of a shooter he is. So I feel like even with 1 or 2 more attempts per game, we still might see him around 39, 40%.
There are some guys like him where shooting 600 threes in a season is actually better for his percentage. Like, that's how it is with Klay Thompson. That's how it is with like Desmond Bane. These guys, they get in a rhythm and they shoot 5, 6, 7 in a row. And I could see that actually impacting Cameron Johnson in a positive way. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, I really love what you guys are saying about the mid-range shooting and the floaters. And it would be amazing if he developed that. I'm a little bit less optimistic. So I'm kind of pivoting towards being really intrigued by this idea of just Cam embracing Morey ball to the fullest extent. Because I kind of do think the Suns need a little bit more Morey ball maybe in their approach sometimes. And so, I don't know. I mean, with where his percentages are, how good he was in the restricted area, how good he was on three-point shooting, if he just plays more minutes and he launches more threes, there is a pathway. He averaged what last year? 12.5 to close to 13 points per game. There is a pathway to 16 to 18 points per game for Cam Johnson. I'm not going to say quite 20. I don't think there's any way for him to get to, unless he literally played like 36 minutes per game. I don't think we see Cam Johnson hit 20 points per game.
Desmond Bane averaged 18 points per game.
It definitely feels like he could.
That's possible.
It definitely feels like 18 points, 6 rebounds for Cam Johnson this season would be possible.
Optimism season has returned. It is here. I mean, I don't think it's wrong. I mean, what did he average like per 36 minutes? I don't necessarily think that he's going to get 36 minutes, but that's probably pretty close to what it is. But like, I was talking about the uptick in overall attempts. He went from 5.6 to 5.9 3-point attempts, and that was an increase of like 2.5 minutes. Like, that should go up more than that. He just needs to take more. But yeah, I think we're all pretty much on the same page when it comes to Cameron Johnson. One thing I'll say is defensively, when it comes to a type of improvement he can make, if he just gets stronger. And I think, Gerald, based on how you talked about him or talked with him, it sounds like that's something he's going to be working on anyway. And if he just gets stronger, I think that could lead to a nice improvement defensively. But do you guys have anything else to add before we end this one, Gerald?
Yeah, I do. Just to your last point there, he had mentioned another nice thing about the offseason is you get the requisite like rest days after a good lift. Him and Mikhail, he said they had both been lifting, and Mikhail's a crazy person. He was talking about how Mikhail will lift and then go play the next day or the same day, but like with him, he can get his actual rest days in now after a good lift, and I think that is huge to allow the body time to recovery when you are trying to lift, when you are trying to put on bulk or whatever. So that's a good sign. As much as we didn't want a long off season for this team in particular, I think that's good for him. And the other thing is, there are a lot of ways in which I think we could all agree on this, where Monty needs to grow as a head coach. But the one that keeps sticking out to me is setting up spot-up shooters. This is something we've talked about with Langston Galloway. It's something that I think is true with Landry Shamet to an extent.
Yeah.
Like, you look around the league and teams are very good at running, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson off of screens. They're good at the Miami Heat running their guys off of screens and freeing them up. The Suns free up 3-point shots, but not to that extent, and they need to have a way to get those, have those spot-up shooters come flying off screens, because that would really help make Cam Johnson's life easier. Like Sam said, I think it was 12% of his threes were open, according to B-Ball Index. He's an elite shooter as it is. Let's make that number a little bit higher next season.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, Gerald. And hey, Mike, maybe we should make the 5th episode this year about Monty Williams' internal development, come to think of it. But
one of the young guys that associated with the Suns,
I guess, I don't have any super strong criticisms of Monty, but it would be one of my number of minor criticisms about Monty that the Suns have done, I think, often a poor job of running off-screen plays comparatively next to some other teams. They do generate threes. Not a ton of threes sometimes compared to other teams, but the way that they generate threes is, yeah, they could do a better job of that.
It's all based on Chris Paul and Devin Booker.
Mm-hmm. It's all based on Chris Paul and Devin Booker,
Mm-hmm.
and there are sets run within that, like the Spain pick and rolls and whatever. They do generate threes, but it's usually like a one pass away type three. It's not a more complicated structure of a play. And I understand the motivation for that because those are, they're complicated by design and can be a pain in the ass to run. And sometimes if they don't work out, then all of a sudden you're sitting there with 8 seconds left on the shot clock and, oh shit, we have to freelance something. But I do think the Suns could be a little bit more inventive in their playbook with that. That's been an issue they've had for years. And I do think, by the way, that is probably one of the number of reasons that Landry Shamet struggled to ever get comfortable in Phoenix last season.
Do you guys remember that play where Marquise Chris and Dragan Bender linked arms to set a screen? Who was even the shooter in that scenario?
Was that Troy Daniels? Probably was that the elevator. Earl Watson would run elevator doors plays.
By the way,
they would shut
elevator
the doors.
doors was such a play that was like, it was fun to look at, but like completely ineffective.
So ineffective. Elevator doors plays are like the play from the mid 2000s that the Warriors were able to do them because Steph and Clay could shoot over anyone with zero space.
Yeah.
But like guys would always close out hard on the elevator doors. Like it didn't open up any time for you. You had to get it off immediately.
The innovation that was missing was linking arms. I think Marcus Chris and Dragan Bender, they were on something there.
Just for like 3 years, everyone jacked off to like elevator doors plays, and then I think finally it caught up with NBA coaches, and they were like, "Wait, this kind of sucks," so they stopped running them. But I did see the Suns do it for Troy Daniels a few times, and I do think it worked.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Earl Watson did run that play. It's definitely something that they ran on that team. But maybe a little more of those would be a good thing.
That speaks to your larger point of, we are nitpicking here because Jesus Christ, look at how far we've come since then. Literally on our podcast today, we're doing Unsung Heroes Week, and we literally had to talk about Earl Watson. And like any criticism I have against Monty is minor compared to the shit we had to go through to get to this point.
Yeah. I mean, like massive blowouts in 3 of the first games of the season was incredibly embarrassing. I'm glad I didn't have a podcast then. Sorry if you did, Gerald. I don't remember, but Gerald Bourguet, go follow him on Twitter. Listen to the PHNX Suns podcast. Read him on phnx.com. And Gerald, is there anything else that you would like to plug?
No, that's it. It's always good to be on the podcast with you guys. Make sure to check ours out if you feel like it. And all my stuff is on gophnx.com, especially as we head into training camp here soon in the next couple of weeks. That's exciting.
Yep. Thank you so much, Gerald.
Whoa. There's still plenty of meat on that bone. Now you take this home, throw it in a pot, add some broth, a potato. Baby, you got a stew going.